The stars had been silent for thousands of years. Then humanity reached out and the galaxy finally answered. But the response was not what anyone on Earth had expected. Instead of welcome, there was laughter. Instead of friendship, there was mockery. The advanced races of the galaxy looked at Earth's technology and saw something primitive. They saw computers that ran on electricity instead of quantum fields. They saw networks that used radio waves instead of instant communication across light years. They saw a species that was still learning to leave its home planet while others had built empires spanning hundreds of worlds. Among all the advanced races, the Zelvor stood at the top. They were the masters of digital technology. Their computers could think faster than any other species. Their networks connected every part of their empire without delay. Their hackers could break into any system in the galaxy. They had toppled governments without firing a single weapon. They had stolen secrets from civilizations that thought their data was safe. They had won wars before the enemy even knew a battle had started. At the center of all this power sat one being. His name was Zeltharan. He was not a soldier or a politician. He was a hacker. But not just any hacker. He was the best the Zelvor had ever produced. His mind worked directly with computers through implants in his brain. He could see data flowing through networks the way humans saw rivers flowing through valleys. He could write code faster than most beings could think. He had never met a system he could not break. He had never faced an opponent who could match his skill. When humanity made contact with the Galactic Council, Zeltharan watched with interest. Then that interest turned to amusement. Then that amusement turned to something close to pity. Earth's technology was so far behind that he could barely believe they had managed to build working spacecraft. Their encryption methods were things the Zelvor had abandoned centuries ago. Their security protocols were full of holes that even a child could exploit. Their networks were open and vulnerable. The Zelvor ruling council held a meeting to discuss the humans. They debated whether Earth should be allowed to join the galactic community. Some said yes, that every species deserved a chance. Others said no, that humanity was too primitive and would only slow down progress. The debate went on for hours. Zeltharan listened to it all and grew bored. Finally, he stood up and made a proposal. He would demonstrate exactly how primitive Earth's technology really was. He would hack into their systems. He would show the entire Galactic Council just how vulnerable the humans were. He would do it all without them even knowing until he revealed himself. The council agreed. Some members were curious. Others were concerned. But all of them wanted to see what would happen. They gave Zeltharan permission to proceed. They told him to be careful not to cause any real damage. They reminded him that first contact was supposed to be peaceful. Zeltharan agreed to all of this, but in his mind he was already planning something more ambitious. He would not just break into Earth systems and leave. He would establish a permanent presence. He would create a backdoor that would let him monitor humanity for years to come. It would be educational, he thought. He could study how primitive species developed their technology. He could watch them slowly realize that they were being observed. It would be entertaining. Zeltharan returned to his command chamber. It was a room filled with holographic displays and neural interface equipment. The walls showed data streams from across the galaxy. The air hummed with the sound of quantum processors working at speeds that would make Earth's fastest computers seem like they were standing still. He settled into his command chair and connected his neural implants to the system. Information flooded into his mind. He could see the galaxy's network spread out before him like a vast ocean, and somewhere in that ocean, tiny and insignificant, was Earth. He began his approach carefully. Even though he expected this to be easy, he was a professional. He mapped Earth's outer defenses first. He identified their satellite networks, their ground stations, their connection points to the wider galaxy. He analyzed their encryption methods and their security protocols. He looked for vulnerabilities in their systems. He did not have to look very hard. The vulnerabilities were everywhere. It was like examining a fortress made of paper. The first breach took less than 3 minutes. Zeltharan's intrusion algorithms cut through Earth's defenses like they were not even there. He found himself inside a military network. He could see classified data flowing past him. He could access weapons systems, communication channels, command structures. Everything was open. Everything was vulnerable. He almost felt bad about how easy this was. Almost. He moved deeper into Earth's systems. He jumped from the military network to civilian infrastructure. He accessed power grids, water systems, traffic controls. He moved through financial networks and saw how humans moved their money around. He entered communication systems and could read their messages. He explored scientific databases and learned about their research. Within an hour, he had mapped almost every major system on the planet. Within 2 hours, he had complete access to everything important. But Zeltherin was not satisfied with just access. He wanted to leave his mark. He wanted the humans to know, eventually, that he had been there. So he began leaving messages, small text files hidden in military databases, little notes in government systems, signatures in corporate networks. Each message said the same thing. Your security is a child's toy. Zeltherin was here. He imagined human security experts finding these messages in the coming months and years. He imagined their panic as they realized someone had been inside their most secure systems. The thought made him feel proud. Now came the important part. Zeltherin needed to establish his permanent backdoor. He needed a way to return to Earth's systems whenever he wanted, without having to break through their defenses again. He began writing code. It was elegant code, beautiful in its complexity. It would hide itself in firmware updates. It would embed itself in network protocols. It would spread through the internet like water flowing downhill. It would be invisible to any security system Earth possessed. It would let him monitor everything they did. It would give him complete control if he ever chose to use it. The code took him 6 hours to write and test. When he was finally satisfied, he released it into Earth's networks. He watched it spread. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Within an hour, it had infected millions of devices. Within a day, it would be in billions. Earth's entire digital infrastructure was now under his control. The humans did not know it yet. Their security systems had not detected anything wrong. Their antivirus programs had not raised any alarms. Their firewalls had not blocked anything suspicious. They were completely unaware that their entire civilization's technology had just been compromised. Zeltherin leaned back in his command chair and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This had been even easier than he had expected. The humans were not just primitive. They were vulnerable in ways that shocked him. Any species in the galaxy could have done what he just did. Earth was defenseless. They were children playing with toys they did not understand. They had no place in the galactic community. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He prepared his report for the Galactic Council. He documented everything he had done. He showed them how easy the breach had been. He demonstrated his complete access to Earth systems. He presented it all as evidence that humanity was not ready for contact with advanced civilizations. The Council would have to agree with him. The facts were undeniable. Earth was centuries behind the rest of the galaxy in every way that mattered. What Zeltherin did not understand, what he could not possibly know, was that his assumptions were completely wrong. Humanity's technology was not primitive because they lacked intelligence or skill. It was simple because they had chosen to build it that way. They had learned their lessons the hard way. They had made their mistakes and fixed them. They had spent decades making their systems work reliably before making them fast. They had focused on understanding the basics before reaching for the advanced. And in that simplicity, in that focus on fundamental principles, lay a strength that the galaxy had forgotten. Every human programmer learned to code from the ground up. They started with simple programs and built their knowledge step by step. They understood how computers worked at the most basic level. They knew every step between a simple instruction and a complex program. This knowledge, this deep understanding of foundations, was something that species who had inherited their technology could never match. In a small apartment in the city of Portland, a programmer named Jack Morrison was about to prove this. He did not know about Zeltherin yet. He did not know about the breach or the backdoor or the council's debate. He was just trying to fix a bug in an old inventory system. But in the process of fixing that bug, he was about to notice something strange, something that should not be there. Something that would change everything. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson. Technology was not about who had the fastest computers or the most advanced networks. It was about who understood the fundamentals. It was about who could see past the complexity to the simple principles underneath. And in that arena, Jack Morrison was not famous. He was not important. He was not the kind of person who changed the world. He was just a programmer who paid his bills by fixing other people's broken code. He lived in a small apartment with his cat. He worked from home most days. He wore comfortable clothes and drank too much coffee and sometimes forgot to eat lunch. He was 28 years old and perfectly ordinary. His specialty was legacy systems. These were old computer programs that companies still used, but nobody really understood anymore. The original programmers had retired or moved on. The documentation was lost or incomplete. The code was written in programming languages that young developers had never learned, but the system still ran important business operations, so someone had to maintain them. That someone was usually Jack. He liked the work. It was like being a detective and a doctor at the same time. He had to figure out what the code was supposed to do. He had to diagnose what was going wrong. He had to fix the problem without breaking anything else. It required patience and attention to detail. It required understanding how computers worked at a fundamental level. It required looking past the surface complexity to see the simple logic underneath. On this particular morning, Jack was working on a job for a small manufacturing company. Their inventory system was having problems. Sometimes it would report the wrong numbers. Not always, just sometimes. The errors were random and unpredictable. The company had tried everything they could think of. They had reinstalled the software. They had checked the hardware. They had hired 3 other programmers before Jack. Nothing had worked. The errors kept happening. Jack had been working on the problem for 2 days. He had read through thousands of lines of code. He had traced data flows and checked memory allocations. He had run the system in test mode and watched it execute line by line. He still had not found the bug, but he was getting close. He could feel it. There was something wrong with how the system handled memory. Something small, something subtle, something that only showed up under certain conditions. He was deep in the code when he noticed something odd. The system was taking slightly longer to complete certain operations than it should. The delays were tiny, microseconds. Most programmers would never have noticed them, but Jack had spent years optimizing old code. He had learned to squeeze every bit of performance from aging hardware. He knew how long each operation should take. These delays should not exist. At first, he thought it was just normal variation. Computers were not perfectly consistent. Background processes could cause small delays. The operating system might interrupt to handle other tasks. But as he watched the patterns, he realized these delays were too regular, too consistent. They happened at specific points in the code. They happened every single time the program reached those points. This was not random. This was something else. Jack opened a monitoring tool and started watching the system at a deeper level. He looked at what the computer was actually doing during those microsecond delays. What he saw made him pause. There was code running, code that was not part of the inventory system, code that was not part of the operating system, code that should not be there at all. It was hidden in the background, stealing tiny slices of processing time, doing something that Jack could not immediately identify. His first thought was malware, some kind of virus or Trojan that had infected the company's computers. But as he examined the code more closely, he realized this was not like any malware he had ever seen. It was too sophisticated, too elegant. The way it hid itself was brilliant. The way it spread through the system was genius. This was not the work of some criminal trying to steal credit card numbers. This was something much more advanced. Jack started tracing the code back to its source. He followed it through the system, watching how it connected to other programs. What he found shocked him. The code was not just on this one computer. It was on the company's entire network. It was in their routers and their servers and their backup systems. And when he checked the connection logs, he saw that it had come from outside. It had entered through the internet, which meant it was probably not just here. It was probably everywhere. He forgot about the inventory system. He forgot about his client waiting for a fix. He forgot about everything except this mysterious code. He had to understand it. He had to know what it was doing and where it came from. He spent the next 18 hours following the trail. He ordered pizza but barely ate it. He made coffee but forgot to drink it. His cat meowed for attention, but he barely noticed. All of his focus was on the code. The more he learned, the more worried he became. This code was everywhere. It was in government systems and military networks. It was in banks and hospitals and schools. It was in power plants and water treatment facilities. It was woven through the entire infrastructure of the internet itself. Whoever had written this code had complete access to everything. They could see everything. They could control everything. And nobody else seemed to have noticed. Jack tried to analyze what the code was doing. It seemed to be mostly watching, collecting information, recording data flows, monitoring communications, but it also had the capability to do much more. There were functions built in that could shut down systems, corrupt data, redirect traffic. The code was like a loaded gun sitting in the middle of Earth's digital infrastructure. Right now it was just watching, but at any moment, whoever controlled it could pull the trigger. The sophistication of the code convinced Jack that this was not human work. It was too advanced. It used techniques that Earth's best programmers were only beginning to explore. It operated on principles that human computers could barely implement. This had to be alien technology. This had to be connected to the recent contact with other species. Someone out there in the galaxy had decided to hack Earth, and they had succeeded completely. Jack should have called someone. The government, the military, someone in authority who could deal with this. But he knew what would happen if he did that. They would not believe him at first. Then they would want to study the code. Then they would form committees and hold meetings and debate what to do. Meanwhile, whoever had planted this code would continue watching. Or worse, they might realize they had been discovered and decide to attack while Earth was still unprepared. So Jack made a decision. He would handle this himself. At least at first. He would try to understand the code well enough to know how to fight it. He would look for weaknesses. He would find a way to remove it from Earth's systems. Then once he had a solution, he would contact the authorities. They could implement his fix across the entire internet. They could protect Earth from whoever was watching through this digital backdoor. But first he needed to understand how the alien code worked. He spent another day analyzing it. He reverse-engineered its functions. He mapped its structure. He traced its connections. And slowly he began to see something interesting. The code was incredibly sophisticated, yes, but it had a weakness. A fundamental vulnerability that came from the very thing that made it so advanced. The alien code had to interface with Earth's systems. No matter how advanced it was, it ultimately had to translate its commands into operations that human computers could execute. It had to use human programming interfaces. It had to follow human protocols. It had to work within the constraints of human technology, and whoever had written this code did not fully understand those constraints. They had assumed that human systems worked like their own. They had made assumptions that were wrong. Jack saw the vulnerability clearly now. The alien code was like a sophisticated lockpick trying to work on a simple mechanical lock. The pick was advanced and elegant, but it was designed for quantum locks that worked on completely different principles. The mechanical lock was simple and basic, but it operated on rules that the lockpick's creator did not fully understand, and that meant the simple lock had an advantage over the sophisticated pick. Human computers were simple compared to alien technology, but humans understood that simplicity completely. Every programmer learned the basics from the ground up. They knew exactly how their computers worked at the most fundamental level. They understood every step from a basic instruction to a complex program. This knowledge was their strength. This understanding was their weapon, and Jack was about to use it. He opened a new file on his computer. He named it test.c, using the C programming language that had been around for decades. C was old. C was simple. C gave programmers direct control over the computer's memory and operations. It was not fancy. It was not advanced. But it was powerful in ways that more modern languages were not. It let you work at the fundamental level where all computers, human or alien, had to operate. Jack began to write. His fingers moved steadily across the keyboard. He was not writing quickly. He was writing carefully. Every line of code had a purpose. Every variable had a clear name. Every function did exactly one thing. He was writing a program that would fight the alien intrusion. But he was not going to fight sophistication with sophistication. He was going to fight it with simplicity. He was going to use the fundamentals. He was going to prove that sometimes the oldest tools were still the best tools. The program grew slowly. Jack tested each part as he wrote it. He made. Every programmer remembered their first program. It was always the same. 2 words printed to a screen. Hello world. It was a tradition that went back to the earliest days of computing. When someone learned a new programming language, the first thing they did was make the computer display those 2 words. It proved that everything was working. It proved that the human mind could command the machine. It was simple. It was basic. But it was also profound. Jack stared at his screen. His program was almost complete. He had spent 3 days writing and testing it. 3 days without proper sleep. 3 days surviving on coffee and whatever food he could grab quickly. His eyes hurt. His back ached from sitting too long. His cat had given up on getting his attention and was sleeping on the couch. But the program was ready, and it would start with those same 2 words that had started every programmer's journey. The alien code was sophisticated. It used quantum computing principles. It adapted to different systems. It hid itself brilliantly. But all of that sophistication meant nothing if it could not interface with Earth's computers. And Earth's computers, no matter how primitive they seemed to aliens, all worked on the same basic principles. They executed instructions in sequence. They stored data in memory. They performed simple operations like addition and comparison, and moving data from one place to another. Everything else was just layers built on top of those fundamentals. The alien hacker had made an assumption. He had assumed that because Earth's technology was simple, it was easy to understand. But simplicity did not mean easy. It just meant transparent. Earth's computers did exactly what they were told to do, nothing more and nothing less. There were no hidden layers of quantum computing to consider. There were no neural interfaces to account for, just simple, clear, predictable operations, and Jack understood those operations completely. His program worked like this. First, it would identify where the alien code stored its control data. Every program, no matter how sophisticated, had to keep track of what it was doing. It had to store information about its current state, its instructions, its communication channels. The alien code was no different. It kept all of this information in specific memory locations. Jack had spent 2 days mapping those locations. He knew exactly where everything was stored. Second, his program would overwrite that control data with garbage. Not all at once. That would be too obvious. The alien code would detect a direct attack and defend itself. Instead, Jack's program would make small changes. It would flip a few bits here, corrupt a few bytes there. Each change would be tiny. Each change would look like normal memory errors that happened randomly in any computer system. The alien code would not recognize it as an attack. It would just think the hardware was having problems. Third, and this was the clever part, his program would use legitimate system operations to make these changes. Earth's computers had built-in functions for managing memory. Programs use these functions all the time to store and retrieve data. The alien code had been programmed to ignore these routine operations. They were too common, too normal to be threats, so Jack's program would hide its attack inside these normal operations. It would look like any other program doing routine memory management, until the damage was done. The beauty of this approach was its simplicity. Jack was not trying to match the alien code's sophistication. He was not trying to outthink a hacker who had centuries of experience. He was just using the tools he knew best. Basic programming, simple logic, fundamental operations, the kind of things he had learned when he first started coding. The kind of things that every human programmer understood, but that aliens, with their advanced technology, had apparently forgotten. Jack read through his code one more time. He checked every line. He verified every function. He made sure there were no mistakes. If this program failed, Earth would remain vulnerable. If it succeeded, humanity would prove that their simple technology was not a weakness. It was a strength that came from truly understanding how computers worked at the deepest level. He thought about what would happen when he ran this program. The alien code would start to fail. Slowly at first, then faster as more and more of its control data became corrupted. It would try to repair itself. But every repair would be corrupted too. The damage would spread through the entire network. Within hours, the alien backdoor would be gone. Earth's systems would be clean again. The invasion would be over before most people even knew it had happened. But Jack's program would do more than just remove the alien code. It would also follow that code back to its source. The alien hacker had established a connection to Earth's systems. That connection went both ways. If Jack could trace it back, he could find out where the hacker was. He could learn about their technology, and he could send them a message. A message that would make very clear that Earth was not as primitive as they thought. His finger hovered over the enter key. Once he pressed it, there would be no going back. His program would launch. It would spread through Earth's networks just like the alien code had. But instead of stealing control, it would return control to humanity. Instead of establishing a backdoor, it would close that backdoor forever. Instead of watching quietly, It would announce loudly that Earth knew how to defend itself. Jack thought about calling someone first. The government. The military. Someone with authority. He could explain what he had found. He could show them his solution. They could make the decision about whether to use it. That would be the responsible thing to do. That would be the safe thing to do. But it would also take time. Time for committees to meet. Time for experts to review his code. Time for politicians to debate. And meanwhile, the alien hacker would continue watching, might realize he had been discovered, might decide to attack before Earth could defend itself. No. This had to be done now. Jack had found the vulnerability. Jack had written the solution. Jack would take responsibility for using it. If he was wrong, if his program caused damage, he would face the consequences. But he was not wrong. He had tested everything. He had checked everything. He knew this would work. And Earth needed protection now, not after weeks of debate and review. He pressed enter. The screen flickered. 2 words appeared. Hello world. The traditional greeting. The first message any programmer learned to create. Now serving as humanity's response to an alien invasion. A response that said, we see you. We understand what you did. We know how to stop you. We are not the primitive species you thought we were. Jack's program began to run. It copied itself to other systems. It spread through networks. It found the alien code wherever it was hiding. And it began its work. Corrupting data. Breaking connections. Dismantling the backdoor piece by piece. The alien hacker would not notice immediately. The changes were too small, too gradual. But soon, very soon, he would realize something was wrong. His masterpiece would start to fail. His control would slip away. And he would understand that he had made a terrible mistake. Earth's computers continued their normal operations. People checked their email and browsed websites and watched videos. Businesses ran their programs and processed their data. Governments maintained their services. Nobody noticed anything different. But underneath all of that normal activity, a silent war was being fought. Human simplicity versus alien sophistication. Basic programming versus quantum computing. And the simple approach was winning. Jack watched his program spread across the network. He could see it finding the alien code. He could see it corrupting the control data. He could see the alien backdoor starting to fail. It was working exactly as he had planned. Within an hour, most of the alien code would be gone. Within 2 hours, all of it would be eliminated. Earth systems would be secure again, and the alien hacker would be left wondering how his sophisticated intrusion had been defeated by what appeared to be a simple maintenance program. But Jack's program had one more task to complete. It had traced the connection back to its source. It had found the alien network. It had identified where the hacker was operating from, and now it was going to send a message. Not a threat, not a warning, just those same 2 words that had started everything. Hello world. A greeting that would appear on every screen in the alien hacker's command center. A greeting that would tell him humans were not as ignorant as he had assumed. A greeting that would change everything. Jack leaned back in his chair. His eyes were burning from staring at the screen too long. His body ached from sitting in the same position for days. But he allowed himself a small smile. He had done it. He had found the alien intrusion. He had written a counter-program. He had launched it successfully. Earth was safe, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity, for all its apparent technological backwardness, was a force to be respected. Somewhere across the galaxy, an alien hacker was about to have a very bad day, and somewhere on Earth, in a small apartment in Portland, a very tired programmer finally got up to feed his cat and make some fresh coffee. The war was over. Humanity had won. And it had all started with 2 simple words. Hello world. Seltharan was reviewing data from Earth when his screens began to flicker. At first he thought it was a minor glitch in his display systems. His command chamber contained thousands of holographic projectors working together to show him information from across the galaxy. Sometimes they had synchronization issues. Sometimes a power fluctuation caused brief disruptions. He had seen it before. This should have been nothing to worry about. But the flickering did not stop. And it was not random. It was happening specifically on the displays showing Earth's networks. Seltharan's neural implants fed him a constant stream of data from his infiltration code. That data flow was always smooth and consistent. But now it was stuttering, dropping packets, missing information. Something was wrong with his connection to Earth systems. He sent a diagnostic command to his intrusion code. The response came back garbled, corrupted. Parts of the data made no sense. Other parts were simply missing. Zeltharan felt a flutter of concern. His code was designed to be self-repairing. If something damaged it, it should automatically fix itself. But the diagnostic results suggested that his code was not repairing properly. In fact, the damage seemed to be spreading. He tried to access the control systems he had embedded in Earth's networks, the systems that would let him take direct action if needed. But the access commands failed. His backdoor was not responding correctly. Parts of it were simply gone. Other parts returned error messages. The whole structure was falling apart. In minutes, he had gone from complete control to barely any connection at all. This should not be possible. Zeltharan had designed his intrusion code to resist any known form of cyber attack. It could defend itself against quantum-level intrusion attempts. It could adapt to new security measures. It could repair damage and rebuild itself if necessary. Human technology was centuries behind what he had prepared for. There was nothing on Earth that should be able to threaten his code. Yet it was failing rapidly. He activated his deep monitoring systems. These were backup sensors that watched his intrusion code from a distance. They could see what was happening even if his direct control was compromised. What they showed him made no sense. His code was being attacked, yes, but not by anything sophisticated. Not by military-grade security systems. Not by advanced artificial intelligence. The attack was coming from what appeared to be a simple maintenance program. Something that should have been completely harmless. Zeltharan watched in growing horror as this simple program systematically destroyed his masterpiece. It was not doing anything complex. It was just corrupting memory addresses, overwriting control data, breaking communication channels. Basic operations that any novice programmer could understand. But his sophisticated intrusion code had been programmed to ignore such simple attacks. It had been designed to watch for quantum-level threats. It had completely missed the danger of fundamental operations working against it. He tried to counter the attack. He sent new code to Earth systems, code that would recognize and stop this maintenance program. But the new code never arrived properly. It was corrupted in transit. The communication channels he relied on were already too damaged. His intrusion code was isolated and dying, and there was nothing he could do to save it. Within an hour, Zeltharan's connection to Earth was completely severed. His intrusion code was gone. His backdoor was closed. Months of work had been eliminated in less time than it had taken him to establish the original breach. He sat in his command chamber, all four of his appendages trembling, trying to understand what had just happened. Someone on Earth had found his code. Someone had understood it well enough to defeat it. Someone had used the simplest possible approach to destroy his most sophisticated creation. Then his screens lit up with a new message. 2 words appeared on every display in his command chamber. They appeared in human text using human characters. "Hello, world." Zeltharan stared at them. He knew what those words meant. Every species in the galaxy that used computers had some version of that phrase. It was the traditional first program. The greeting that proved a system was working. But why was it appearing on his screens now? Then he understood. The human who had destroyed his intrusion code had not just defended Earth. They had followed his connection back. They had traced the quantum-entangled channels he had used. They had found his command center. They had reached across the galaxy to deliver this message. This greeting. This proof that they could access his systems just as easily as he had accessed theirs. Zeltharan immediately activated his security protocols. He disconnected his command systems from the galactic network. He shut down his neural implants. He isolated every piece of equipment that might have been compromised. His entire operation went dark. He was blind now, cut off from his networks, unable to perform his duties. But that was better than letting the human have access to Zelvor systems. Better than giving them the chance to do to his civilization what he had tried to do to theirs. But the damage was already done. The message had been seen. Not just by Zeltharan, but by every monitoring system in the Zelvor intelligence network. The humans had reached into the heart of the galaxy's most advanced cyber warfare facility. They had delivered a message that proved they were not helpless, not primitive, not easy targets. They were dangerous. They were capable. They deserved respect. Zeltharan sat in darkness and silence. His command chamber was shut down. His displays were blank. His implants were disconnected. He had spent centuries building his reputation as the galaxy's greatest hacker. He had defeated civilizations. He had toppled governments. He had never lost a cyber confrontation. Until now. Until a human with primitive technology had beaten him using the most basic programming techniques imaginable. He would have to report this to the Zelvor ruling council. They would have to know that their assessment of humanity had been wrong. Earth was not primitive. Earth was dangerous in ways the galaxy had not anticipated. Their simple technology was not a weakness. It was a foundation, a deep understanding of fundamentals that let them accomplish things more advanced species could not. The Galactic Council would need to be informed as well. Every species would need to revise their evaluation of humanity. The humans could not be dismissed as backward newcomers. They had just proven they could defend themselves against the galaxy's best cyber warfare expert. They had proven they could strike back across light years of distance. They had proven they understood technology at a level that other species had forgotten. Zeltharan thought about the human who had defeated him. Someone sitting at a computer somewhere on Earth. Someone using tools that the Zelvor would consider ancient. Someone writing code and programming languages that were older than many galactic civilizations. Yet that someone had accomplished what should have been impossible. They had not just defended their planet. They had taught the entire galaxy a lesson about the value of understanding fundamentals. The galaxy had built its technology on layers of complexity. Each generation made things more sophisticated, more advanced, more powerful. But somewhere along the way, they had lost touch with the basics. They used quantum computers without understanding the simple logic gates underneath. They used neural interfaces without understanding the basic input-output operations. They had built towers of technology without maintaining the foundation. Humanity had not made that mistake. They had kept their technology simple. They had learned from the ground up. Every human programmer understood the basics. They knew how computers worked at the fundamental level. They had not forgotten the foundation in their rush to build towers. And that foundation had just proven stronger than all the sophisticated complexity the galaxy could bring to bear. Zeltharan finally stood up. He needed to reconnect his systems. He needed to contact the council. He needed to begin the process of explaining how he had been defeated. It would be humiliating. It would damage his reputation. Some would say he should have known better than to underestimate an unknown species. They would be right. He should have been more careful. He should have studied human technology more thoroughly before attacking it. But even in defeat, Zeltharan felt something like respect for the human who had beaten him. They had not used brute force. They had not relied on superior technology. They had simply understood their own systems better than he did. They had used that understanding as a weapon, and they had won decisively. That took skill. That took intelligence. That took the kind of deep knowledge that only came from years of study and practice. The galaxy was about to change. Humanity had announced itself not as primitive newcomers, but as masters of fundamental technology. Other species would need to adapt. They would need to relearn the basics they had forgotten. They would need to understand that advanced technology was not enough. True mastery required understanding all the way down to the foundation. And Earth had just taught them all that lesson with two simple words: hello, world. 3 months after the incident, Jack Morrison found himself in a place he had never expected to be. He was sitting in a secure conference room deep underground in Washington. Around him were military generals, government officials, and corporate executives. On the holographic screen in front of them were representatives from the Galactic Council. Alien beings from dozens of different species, all waiting to hear what he had to say. Jack was uncomfortable. He was wearing a suit for the first time in years. His hair was neatly combed. His shoes were polished. He looked like someone important. But inside, he still felt like the same freelance programmer who had been debugging inventory systems just a few months ago. The same guy who lived in a small apartment with his cat. The same person who had never wanted to be famous or important. He just wanted to write good code and solve interesting problems. But he had solved a problem that changed everything. He had discovered an alien intrusion into Earth systems. He had figured out how to stop it. He had written a program that defeated the galaxy's most advanced hacker. And he had done it all using basic programming techniques that any first-year computer science student could understand. That made him important whether he wanted to be or not. The Zelvor delegation on the screen included Zeltharan himself. The alien hacker had requested this meeting personally. He wanted to understand how he had been defeated. In the months since the incident, Zelvor scientists had examined every detail of what had happened. They had analyzed Jack's counter-intrusion program. They had studied human programming techniques. And they had come to some surprising conclusions. Seltharan spoke first. His words were translated into English by the communication system. He explained that his intrusion had been designed to counter the most advanced cyber attacks the galaxy could produce. It could defend against quantum-level threats. It could adapt to artificial intelligence opponents. It could repair itself after almost any kind of damage. But it had one critical weakness. It had been designed to ignore simple, basic operations as harmless background noise. Jack had exploited that weakness perfectly. His program had used only the most fundamental operations. Memory management, data copying, basic logic, things that happened millions of times per second in any computer system, things that the sophisticated alien code had been programmed to filter out as irrelevant. By hiding his attack inside these normal operations, Jack had made his counter-intrusion completely invisible until it was too late. The Galactic Council listened carefully as Jack explained his approach. He described how human programmers learned to code from the ground up, how they started with simple programs and gradually built their understanding, how they were taught to understand every layer of technology, from the hardware up to the final application. This foundation, this deep knowledge of how computers actually worked, was something unique to humanity. Other species in the galaxy had developed technology differently. They had inherited advanced systems from earlier civilizations. They had built on top of existing platforms. They had focused on making things more powerful and more sophisticated, but they had skipped the step of truly understanding the basics. They could use quantum computers without knowing how logic gates worked. They could program neural interfaces without understanding basic input and output. They had powerful tools but limited understanding. Humanity's approach was different. Earth had developed its technology slowly and carefully. Every generation of programmers learned the same fundamentals. They wrote their first programs in simple languages. They debugged code line by line. They understood that before you could build something complex, you needed to master something simple. This methodology had seemed primitive to the galaxy, but it had given humanity a depth of knowledge that more advanced species lacked. The implications were profound. Over the following months, the Galactic Council completely revised their assessment of humanity. Earth was no longer seen as a primitive species struggling to catch up. They were now recognized as specialists in fundamental technology. Their programmers were uniquely qualified to understand and debug systems at the deepest level, skills that the galaxy desperately needed. Job offers started coming in. Alien civilizations wanted to hire human programmers. They needed help debugging ancient systems that nobody understood anymore. They wanted security audits performed by people who could think like hackers, but also understood the fundamentals. They wanted teachers who could help their own programmers relearn the basics that had been forgotten over centuries of technological advancement. Jack himself received hundreds of offers. Governments wanted him to work on their security systems. Corporations wanted him to consult on their networks. Academic institutions wanted him to teach their students. He turned down most of them. He was not interested in being famous. He did not want to spend his life traveling to different planets. He just wanted to go back to his apartment in Portland and write code and spend time with his cat. But he did accept one position. He became an advisor to Earth's delegation to the Galactic Council. He helped other programmers understand how to work with alien technology. He shared his knowledge about fundamental programming principles. He made himself available for consultation on difficult problems. It was part-time work that he could do from home. It let him contribute without giving up his normal life. Seltharan became an unexpected friend. The alien hacker had been humbled by his defeat, but he had also been intrigued. He wanted to learn human programming techniques. He wanted to understand the fundamentals that he had overlooked in his centuries of working with advanced systems. So he and Jack began a regular correspondence. They shared code. They discussed programming problems. They learned from each other. Through this collaboration, something remarkable began to happen. Human and alien programmers started developing hybrid approaches. They combined galactic technological advancement with human fundamental understanding. They created systems that were both powerful and comprehensible, Networks that were sophisticated but also secure. Artificial intelligence that was advanced but also transparent in how it made decisions. The best of both approaches working together. The galaxy changed. Programming education across hundreds of worlds was reformed to include fundamental training. Young programmers now learned the basics before moving to advanced topics. Computer science became less about using the most powerful tools and more about understanding how those tools actually worked. The Hello World program, that simple human tradition, became a galactic standard. Every programmer, regardless of species, now started their journey with those same 2 words. Jack returned to his normal life as much as he could. He still lived in his small apartment. He still took freelance contracts debugging legacy systems. He still drank too much coffee and sometimes forgot to eat lunch. But now he also had consulting work from alien civilizations. Now he received messages from programmers on distant planets asking for advice. Now his simple counter-intrusion program was studied in computer science classes across the galaxy. Every time he started a new project, Jack would open a fresh terminal window and create a test file. He would write those 2 words that had started everything. Hello world. The greeting that proved his system was working. The message that had changed galactic history. The simple phrase that reminded him why he loved programming in the first place. Because at its core, programming was about communication, about telling a machine what to do, about making technology serve human needs. And the best way to do that was to understand the fundamentals completely. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was not primitive. Earth's simple technology was not a weakness. Understanding fundamentals was more valuable than using advanced tools without comprehension. Sometimes the oldest approaches were still the best approaches. Sometimes the most basic solution was the most effective solution. And sometimes all it took to change the world was 2 simple words and a deep understanding of how computers actually worked. Seltherin had taunted Earth's technology. He had assumed that simplicity meant weakness. He had believed that centuries of technological advancement made him superior to any human programmer. He had been wrong. Jack Morrison had typed Hello World and ended his network. And in doing so, Jack had taught the entire galaxy that true mastery came not from complexity but from understanding, not from power but from knowledge, not from sophistication but from solid fundamentals. Humanity took its place in the galactic community not as primitive newcomers but as teachers and specialists. Their programmers were respected throughout the galaxy. Their methods were studied and adopted by other species. Their approach to technology became a model for how to build systems that were both powerful and understandable. Earth had proven itself worthy of respect, and it had done so without matching alien technology advancement for advancement. It had done so by being better at the basics than anyone else. Years later, when historians wrote about first contact between humanity and the wider galaxy, they would point to this incident as the turning point. The moment when Earth stopped being seen as a backward planet and started being recognized as a valuable member of galactic civilization. The moment when the galaxy learned that different did not.